God, I come before you today to offer myself as an instrument. I come to you asking for your grace and your strength, that you remove me from my fears, concerns, and anxieties, and replace it with the movement of your Holy Spirit within me. We ask that you anoint the ears of those who hear a message today, that this message be for them wherever they may be on their journey, and that they may find a sense of release, dignity, and respect. Amen. Remembering Stonewall, let my people go. Today's sermon is a little bit different in the fact that I'm going to give a little history lesson before I actually start the sermon. In the early hours of June 28, 1969, New York City police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay club located in Greenwich Village in New York. The raid sparked a riot among bar patrons and neighborhood residents as police roughly hauled employees and patrons out of the bar, leading to 6 days of protest and violent clashes with the law enforcement outside, the bar on Christopher Street, in neighboring streets, and in nearby Christopher Park. The Stonewall riots served as a catalyst for the gay rights movement in the United States and around the world. Not many churches you will hear this. Gay bars are a place of refuge and safety. In the 1960s and preceding decades, those were not welcoming times for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered Americans. For instance, solicitation of homosexual relations was illegal in New York, and there was a criminal statute that allowed police to arrest people for wearing less than their gender-appropriate articles of clothing. Some of you going to jail today. For such reasons, LGBT individuals flocked to gay bars and clubs and places of refuge where they could express themselves openly and socialize without worry. However, the New York State Liquor Authority penalized and shut down establishments that served alcohol to known or suspected gay and lesbian people, arguing that the mere gathering of homosexuals was disorderly. Thanks to activists' efforts, these regulations were overturned in 1966, and LGBT patrons could now be served alcohol. But engaging in gay behavior in public, holding hands, kissing, or dancing with someone of the same sex was illegal. So police harassment of gay bars continued, and many bars still operated without a liquor license, in part because they were owned by the mafia. The crime syndicate saw profit in catering to shunned gay clientele, and in the mid-1960s, the Genovese family controlled most of Greenwich Village gay bars. And in 1966, they purchased the Stonewall Inn, at that time a straight bar, and restaurant. They cheaply renovated it and reopened it the next year as a gay bar. Stonewall Inn was registered as a type of private bottle bar, which did not require a liquor license because patrons were supposed to bring their own liquor. Club attendees had to sign their names in the books upon entry to maintain the club's false exclusivity. The crime family that owned it bribed New York's 6th Police Precinct to ignore the activities occurring within the club. Without police interference, the crime family could cut costs how they saw fit. The club lacked fire exits, running water behind the bar to wash glasses didn't exist, clean toilets that routinely overflowed were in the building, the palatable drinks that weren't watered down beyond recognition. What's more, the mafia reportedly blackmailed the club's wealthier patrons who wanted to keep their sexuality a secret. Nonetheless, Stonewall Inn became an important Greenwich Village institution. It was large and relatively cheap to enter. It welcomed drag queens who received a bitter reception at other gay bars and clubs. It was a nightly home for many runaways and homeless gay youths. They would panhandle or shoplift to afford the entry fee. And it was one of the few, if not the only, gay bar that allowed dancing. Raids were still a fact of life, but usually corrupt cops would tip off the mafia that ran the bars, allowing the owners to stash the alcohol sold without a liquor license and hide the other illegal activities. The NYPD had stormed Stonewall in just a few days, stormed the Stonewall Inn just a few days before the riot-inducing raid. When the police raided Stonewall Inn on the morning of June 28th, it came as a surprise to the bar, for they had not been tipped off. Armed with a warrant, police officers entered the club, roughed up the patrons, and finding bootlegged alcohol, arrested 13 people, including employees, and people violating the state's gender-appropriate clothing statute. A female officer would take suspected people into the bathroom and check their genitalia. Fed up with the constant police harassment and social discrimination, angry patrons and neighborhood residents hung around outside the bar rather than disperse, becoming increasingly agitated as the events unfolded and people were aggressively manhandled. At one point, an officer hit a lesbian over the head as he forced her into the paddy wagon. She shouted to onlookers, "Act now," inciting the crowd to begin. Throwing pennies, bottles, cobblestones, and other objects at the police. Within minutes, a full-blown riot involving hundreds of people began. The police, a few prisoners, and a Village Voice rider barricaded themselves inside the bar, which the mob attempted to set on fire after breaching the barricades repeatedly. The fire department and riot squad were eventually able to douse the flames and rescue those inside Stonewall and disperse the crowd. But the protest, sometimes involving thousands of people, continued in the area for 5 more days, flaring up at one point after the Village Voice published its account of the riots. Though the Stonewall uprising didn't start the gay rights movement, it was a galvanizing force for LGBT political activism. leading to numerous gay rights organizations, including the Gay Liberation Front, Human Rights Campaign, GLAAD, formerly known as Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and PFLAG. In 2016, President Barack Obama designated the site of the riots, the Stonewall Inn, Christopher Park, and surrounding streets and sidewalks, a national monument in recognition of the area's contribution to gay and human rights. The readings that I selected for today's service may seem somewhat out of the ordinary, but that's okay, so are we. I want to focus this morning, as we celebrate our Pride service, on the reading from the book of Exodus. Moses said to the Pharaoh, "Let my people go." All Moses wanted was for the people to be let go for just a time, a small respite, time of prayer. Yet instead of letting the people go, the Pharaoh made their labor even more difficult and burdensome. When they did finally leave, it was to reach the promised land and not just take a short break from the bondage and labors that they had to face. This was going to be a permanent move. That was the same as the beginning of our movement within the LGBTQIA community. It seemed that all the people at Stonewall Inn really wanted was just to have a safe place, a respite, a place to gather, a refuge. Yet, just as it was with the Israelites, they left the imprisonment of the Egyptians, but did not leave the imprisonment of being oppressed and marginalized. This had become their way of life, and it was the only one that they knew. They presented their own obstacles that would keep them from making it to the land of promise, the land of freedom. We have the same issues today in our community. Yes, the movement began and was galvanized at least 50 years ago, but we sometimes do not feel that we have the rights to claim our own promised land. I assure you, my brothers and sisters, that we are entitled to that promised land, a forever land, not just the respite. We deserve glory for life, not just a happy hour. Amen. We are challenged to bring everyone along with us so that we can continue to truly be the fabric of the rainbow flag. A flag that is big enough to accept all those that want to come in. If there's a need to add another color to the rainbow flag, then do it. Let's quit wasting our time and our energy or our spirit to argue about it. If there needs to be a brown stripe on it, put the damn brown stripe on it and celebrate them. Here's a tidbit of information for you. Did you know the main rainbow flag that we celebrate today actually had the color lavender also in it? And the color pink? It was so important that they had to remove the lavender color because it didn't fit. When they hung it up on the flagpoles and on the lamp posts in San Francisco, you couldn't see it. If it's not that important, then get rid of it. No. Don't discard anything. If there is a need to add that color, then let's do it. For all we know, that new addition of their fabulous color just may make the rainbow even more vibrant and more beautiful. Remember, we do not celebrate Pride because we have a way of life that we have chosen. We celebrate Pride because we are a people willing to leave the world of marginalization and bondage, hatred and bigotry, judgment and ridicule, and live a life celebrating the fact that we were created to be even more than who we are. Take pride in the fact that we're a diverse culture with all kinds of people and all types of fashion sense, and for some of us who have no fashion sense at all. This is just great, for that is who we are. Each day we can decide if we want to be walking around the mountain as the Israelites did for so many years, or do we want to go ahead and live our promised land? Today, let us know that we're not headed for just a land of streets of milk and honey or streets of gold. We are more magnificent and fabulous than that, people. Our streets are paved with rainbow glitter, unicorns, and high-heel shoes lining the sidewalks. We are a beautiful, colorful people. And the only whips and chains that exist are for those who share in that fetish style of life. Praise God for them. We should also celebrate and honor them also. There is nothing to be ashamed of. And if you can put on a 6-inch heel and a dress and put your makeup on and you can walk down Dixon Street, more power to you, sister. Because my big butt can't do it. I'm looking over here at all the lesbians. I don't see them doing it. Good God, I just had a vision of Debbie in 6-inch heels. No, it wasn't Barry. It wasn't Azuri. We have nothing to fear, for we have already had Marsha P. Stevenson say 50 years ago, act now. So let us start taking action now for the safety and love of ourselves and for the broader future of those who will come after us. We must remember that the next generation of God's chosen people of the LGBTQIA community will need to see our self-respect and self-worth so that they can claim the same power for themselves. If we want to have others, let us go then. We must also allow others to be let go and to be free. Happy Pride. Celebrate yourselves. Amen.